Hi everyone, my last video was a quick introductory look at this Nikon's new Nikon Z 24 to 200mm lens. Now I've had it for a week or so. I've had time to have a closer look at it and put it up against the 2470 f4. So I've got a few comparisons between the two lenses. Now, of course, the 2470 only goes as far as 70mm and the 24 to 200 goes beyond 70mm, so there's a fair comparison with this lens up to 70mm. Beyond that, I needed to call in some more glass. So I got my my 70 to 200 2.8, and that did the longer lengths on this lens. I can compare against that. And at the extreme end, the 200mm end, I even put it up against my 200 to 500 f5.6. Now, I've had both of these lenses a few years. I'm very happy with them both, and I think the results are great. I've had this one a few months. I am absolutely blown away with the quality of it, and I was very interested to see how my new purchase compares. Now, I'm not promising you're going to see the world's most exciting photographs. You're going to see some pictures of brick walls because there's nice horizontal and vertical lines in it. You're going to see plain pictures of a white ceiling to see how much vignetting there is. But I'm hoping I'll also throw in a couple of photos just taken with this lens. The trouble is, it's been raining all week. It's been pretty miserable. I think the results are surprising. I'm going to say no more than that at the minute, in the hope that you'll keep watching and you'll see what you think of it. Thanks for watching. Do subscribe if you have the opportunity to. That'd be great. Thank you. So let's start with the general operation of the lens. 67mm filter thread. No cut-off. It's got a lovely flat back element that kind of scares you. It's very, very close to the edge of that mount, so don't ever be tempted to lay it down on a table without putting the lens cap on. I know most of you won't, but some of you will. There's a lock just here. This lock, it locks it at 24mm, so it doesn't move around in your camera bag and grow and whatever. Whether you need it, I don't know, because there's no zoom droop. No droop at all. Wherever you put it, 50, about 85, 135, no zoom droop at all. Whether it gets looser with use, as yet I can't tell. I reckon it probably will, most zooms do. But it's a lovely smooth zooming action. It's the Nikon twin ring setup. This ring can be programmed. The default setting is to have it for manual focus override. Don't need to flick any switches on it, don't need to do anything, you just grab that and you go from autofocus to manual focus. You can program it to aperture, you can program it to exposure compensation, you can program it to anything you like pretty well. I like it at the default setting, so I just leave it at that. That's it, that's kind of it. It's very, very simple. Good lens, all made of plastic. Metal mount, good quality metal mount, looks lovely. It's got a nano glass and posh elements and everything else in, most of which I think are words they invent to make the lenses sound good. But it's well constructed, built in Thailand. Some people make a fuss all while they're built in Japan. I don't think it makes a blind bit of difference where it's built. Lovely smooth action. Let's have a look at the results. Okay everyone, so let's take a look at my relatively unscientific tests on lens test sharpness. This was done by pointing my camera out of my patio doors onto my back garden. This is the field of view I get with the 24mm lens. I shot it vertically because I'm going to look at the central area. Now the next few photos you'll see the central area, which is about this bit here, and the edge area, which is kind of this bit here. Here's the center, and we've got the 24 to 200 top left compared with the 24 to 70 top right. These were shot at full aperture, both at f4. This is the center of both lenses. I've examined these really closely, and to be honest, you can hardly tell the difference between the two. Similarly at the edges, and they're both extremely good. If we look at a couple of these full frame, this is the 24-70. It's actually focused on this wall here. So if this is not quite sharp, it's not because the lens isn't sharp, it's because there isn't enough depth of field to pull that all the way back. But it still looks pretty sharp to me. If you're looking at this on a normal computer screen, let's say a 16-17 inch screen, that's the equivalent of looking at a print around about 6 feet high. That's a mighty big print. And if, like me, you're viewing this screen from about 18 inches, 2 foot away from it, you don't look at a 6 foot high print from 18 inches or 2 foot, generally. Most of us never print to that size. I'll be honest, I don't. And if we do, we very rarely view it in this kind of way. So this is, while it's a good lens test, it's not a practical demonstration of how the image looks. But this is what I wanted to show, how good these lenses are. The 24-200 at f4 at the edge, equally sharp, cracking results, really good. Stop them down to f11, and this is as, I'll be honest, this is as good as lenses get. They're fantastic. They're both really sharp. Same at the edge. Minimal chromatic aberration. Very, very sharp indeed. Beautiful resolution. Distortion isn't really measurable in practical terms because the camera corrects distortion. It corrects chromatic aberration in camera. So when you download them, they've already been corrected. So the straight edges look straight. This is at f22. You can see the straight edge along the bottom of the frame is about as straight as you get. It's not, at f22, looking at these really, really closely in full screen, there is the very, very slightest amount of softening over f11. f11 is absolutely superb. f22, there is a tiny bit of fall off. But again, in practical terms, if you need that depth of field, shoot it at f22. A touch of sharp. These haven't had sharpening added. These haven't had any processing done to them. These are straight out of camera, and they are remarkably good. With a touch of processing, you add that little bit of sharpness, you're going to be able to shoot at f22 if you really want to. Yes, my advice is to stay away from it unless you really need it. Shoot at f11, shoot at f16, shoot at f8, but they're absolutely brilliant. The edge, just the same. They're great edges and fronts. This is the view taken at 70mm, again on the 24-200. This is the full shot. The central area we'll be looking at here. The edge area, I went over to the left-hand side this time because then depth of field didn't come into it and the edge of this wall might not be sharp at full aperture. So we've got 3 lenses here. We managed to pull in the 70-200 as well. You can see my immediate deliberate error. I shot the 24-70 first at full aperture at f4, top right. I then shot the 70-200 bottom left at the same aperture, f4. I then put on the 24-200 and realised by the time I zoomed to 70mm, I can't get f4. It actually, full aperture on that is f6. But I thought it was still good for a direct comparison. All 3 in the centre look beautifully sharp. All 3 at the edge look beautifully sharp, even when I view them full screen. I'm going to talk through these and slip on. If you want to look closely, just pause the video. At f11, the centre is as good as it gets. I couldn't see anything, centre or edge, on any of these lenses that wouldn't stop me printing it massively huge. These are all absolutely superb lenses at 70mm. At f22, yeah, you can definitely see a little bit of fall off on the 24-70 and on the 24-200.
70 to 200, probably a little better at f22 than the other two lenses. Hasn't got quite as much diffraction. The edge is no different. They're a tiny bit softer at f22 than they were at f11. Again, add a bit of sharpening, view it at a sensible distance, but don't blow it up to 6 feet across, and it'll look just superb. Zooming into 200mm, of course the 24 to 70 comes out the equation, and I've still got three lenses I could compare here. There's the 24-200 at 6.3 top left, there's the 70 to 200 at 6.3 top right, and there's the 200 to 500 as Nikon describes it as a budget lens, or as not as a professional lens, bottom left. The sharpest of these three I'd actually say is the 200 to 500 just. Probably followed by the 24 to 200, and maybe then even the 70 to 200. I was really impressed with the results at 200mm on that lens. If we look in the corner, and this is the bottom left hand corner of the photo, at 6.3, the 200 to 500 is absolutely as sharp as a nut. The 24 to 200 has a little bit of an aberration. I can see, if you look at that little stone there, it's not quite as crisp on that one as it is on that one. If your photo is so boring that you're looking at the detail of a stone in the corner of a photo, maybe you should reconsider your compositions. This, to me, was the big disappointment. The corner of that 70 to 200 of mine, I don't think I've ever knocked it, but it does look a little bit, well, it does look significantly soft in that bottom left-hand corner. Again, this is looking at a 6 foot print. I've never ever spotted it in years and years of use. It came as a bit of a surprise. That's the 6.3 on the 200 to 500. It's so sharp. That's the 70 to 200, a little bit disappointing. And that's the 24 to 200. It's a great result. Let's stop down to f11. The center, absolutely brilliant, all three lenses. The edge, absolutely brilliant on the 24 to 200, the same on the 200 to 500, not quite so good again on the 70 to 200. Stopping down to f22, I really couldn't detect any chromatic aberration at f22 that would stop me from using it, which is probably kind of useful, because f22, you're going to need that depth of field more with a long focal length lens than with a wide angle lens. I can't remember ever using a particular wide angle lens stopped down to f22 for depth of field. Maybe to give me a slower shutter speed, yes. But a 200mm lens, you get inherently a shallower depth of field with a longer focal length lens, so you're more prone to use those smaller apertures to get greater depth of field. Great results in the center on the 24-200 and on the 200 to 500, and in fact on the 70 to 200. Even the edges, all three lenses, very much the same. I can't really, if I mix those up, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between those lenses. So that's the sharpness. Let's look at the really boring stuff. You think photos of brick walls are boring, this is even worse. You can fast forward through this if you really want, but vignetting. People worry about whether their lens is vignette or not. I'm only comparing the 24 to 70 and the 24 to 200 here. This is the 24 to 200 at 24mm. You can see from that top left hand image at f4 there's a little bit of vignetting in the corners. To some people that's a major issue, to some people that's a problem. I'm just going to skip forward a photo. That's on the 24-70 and it's the same on that. It is the same on the 70 to 200. Most lenses, doesn't go to 24 of course, most lenses will vignette at full aperture to a certain extent. Rather than consider this as a disadvantage, consider this as a way of concentrating the viewer's eye on the subject. And if you're shooting at full aperture, very often your subject's going to be fairly central and you're going to be trying to direct the viewer to the middle of the photo. By the time you get down to f5.6, that vignetting's virtually gone. At f8 and all the way through, completely gone. These are the photos of my lounge ceiling. 24-70 is pretty well the same at 24mm. By the time we zoom into 70mm, you'll notice top left hand corner here on the 24-200 is blank because we don't have an f4. We don't actually have a 5.6, we have an f6, but there's no vignetting at all, and there's nothing all the way through to f22. Same on the 24-70. We do have an f4. The vignetting's pretty well gone on that right the way through. So the corrections, the in-camera corrections for that work very well. Just remember, at the wide angle lens you get a little bit of vignetting at the wide apertures. To me that's no great disadvantage, because on a huge number of my photos, when I process them, I darken the corners anyway to pull the viewer's eye towards the centre of the picture. So that kind of does it for me. So let's look at a few photos, just a few snaps. I took these just outside the house in a couple of days. This is the view from the front of my house over Keswick with the 24-200mm lens set at 24mm. Some people don't like the idea of wide ranging zoom. Some people realise how useful they are. They are not a solution to everything, but they are fantastic when you need them. 24mm. See the little red square here? That effectively is the 200mm end of my 24mm lens. So if I zoom in and take that, that's the full picture. And I've got everything in between. I've got a fantastic array of focal lengths there, all in one lens that weighs just over 500 grams. So I just took a wander around the town. Its contrast, this was just one of the houses on the way into town. The contrast is tremendous. It's fantastic. The verticals and horizontals, I did have to point the lens up slightly to get this photo. I have corrected the verticals in Lightroom, but I haven't added any distortion correction. And you look at the downpipes on the very right hand edge and the very left hand edge of that photo, they are perfectly vertical. You look at the windows at the very top edge of the photo, they're perfectly horizontal. It's remarkable. I'm very, very impressed with the sharpness and the detail of that lens. So I just pointed it at the sun just to see how badly it flared. This is a wide ranging, people used to call them super zooms. This is a wide ranging zoom. It's got a shed load of elements in it, should flare like mad. Yeah, there's no flare. No flare at all. Obviously the contrast is far greater than you can genuinely cope with in a single photo, and I haven't tried to boost shadows or recover highlights or anything. That's straight out the camera. And there's no flare there. The sun's in the shot. Practical use of the lens. Did a walk over Melbrake, looking down on Crummock Water and Buttermere in the background. Medium wide angle, about a 30mm focal length. It's a cracking lens to have. It's lovely and sharp. There's good contrast. Here at the side of Crummock Water, I decided to shoot some photos with a view to stitching them together, and this is a stitched panorama on the same lens. They all join up perfectly. The results look great. The lens itself doesn't have stabilization built into it because it's designed for use with the Z6 and the Z7 bodies, both of which have in-body image stabilization, or IBIS. This was shot going up to Stickle Tarn in the Langdales, handheld at f22, corners look fine to me, at 1/5 of a second. I've zoomed right into the detail on this, and the rocks, certainly to here and down here, and the grass is here, absolutely crisp, absolutely sharp, and some movement in the water, handheld at 1/5. I'm a huge advocate of using tripods, but if you're trying to travel light with a really wide angle zoom, then maybe that's when you would choose not to have a tripod with you. So I thought that was a practical test for the lens. Most people, an awful lot of people, think that if you shoot in landscapes, you shoot everything on a wide angle, and that a 24-70 would be perfectly useful for landscape photography over, let's say, that 24-200. This is shot at about 120mm, so it's gone beyond that 70mm. It's a slight telephoto shot. It enabled me to crop out the sky. I have cropped the photo very slightly because I prefer the format of it, but that shot beyond the 70 mils, about 120 mil. Same with this one. Shot from the top of Dodd, which is near to Skidder, looking down over Cat Bells and Maidenmoor in the background. Again cropped to a slightly longer, thinner image, but shot again at about 130 millimeters focal length. And just to end, 200 mil, moon in the sky, got detail in the moon. There's not a lot of detail in the ground, but there's a massive contrast between the two, but I've kept detail throughout that sky. So overall, tremendously useful focal length, and very, very portable. Just one more photo to look at here, and it was this one. I just shot it on the way home from town one day. It was raining a bit, and I loved the way the light was, or the rain and the light was falling on these flowers. I shot it at full aperture because one of the biggest concerns with people is the bouquet of zoom lenses. With the massive various elements that they have within them, a zoom lens can have a really untidy, messy bokeh. As you stop this lens down, it's not a 15 blade aperture. That's the thing. It's about an 8-9 blade aperture, and the outer focus blobs in the background here do change into 9-bladed shapes. But certainly at full aperture, I think the bokeh is very attractive. I don't think it's distracting. I think, if anything, it enhances the image. And you can see again here the sharpness on the foreground here. This is shot towards the long end of the lens, about 180 millimeters. That's just a few snaps I've taken over the last week, guys. I hope you found them useful, and I'll hand back to me to sort of conclude.
So there you have it. There's the results, and I was really, really surprised. I don't pretend that this lens is perfect by any means. It's a little bit slow at the 200mm end. It stops down to 6.3 maximum aperture by the time you get to 100mm. So it is a slow lens. That said, how many photos do most people take when they travel on wide aperture lenses at full aperture? It's a perfect travel lens. It is a perfect lens for taking out as a one lens walkabout lens. Yes, at 24mm it suffers a little bit from chromatic aberration if you really push the corners, and by that I mean if you push sort of trees against white sky, then you'll see some of that chromatic aberration. Other than that, I couldn't find any fault with it. How does it stack up against this? Nearly as sharp. It is nearly as sharp as the 24-70S lens. I'm going to keep that lens for sure. I will use it a lot. I'm going to use this a hell of a lot. This lens, of course, not supposed to be a top-notch pro lens. It's Nikon class it as a budget lens, despite the fact it's over £1,000. And it's fabulously sharp. Really, really good. So at 200mm, not much between them. Interesting, isn't it? 2/3 of a stop difference, and a little bit in size. It does go to 500 though, so I'll let it off. It's a cracking lens. This is the lens that was the big surprise for me. This was the one I was most disappointed with, actually. The corners on this are quite poor. There's no denying it. If you look at the f4 and f8 corners on this lens, they weren't brilliant by any means. So this was the disappointing lens for me. It's not going to go on eBay. I still love it because it's sharp as a nut in the middle, and people don't spend their time. It's all well and good testing lenses. The most important thing is where you point them. I have used some pretty rubbish lenses in my time, and I have got some amazing photos with them. The only thing that really matters is where you point the lens. But it's always reassuring to know that whatever lens you've got, you know, the results are going to be as good as they can be. Nikon's 24 to 200 Z lens, small, light, incredibly versatile. And the great thing about lenses like this, you've never got the wrong lens on. Thank you ever so much for watching. I'll see you next time.